Yeah, hey Abhishek. Hi, thanks for doing this. Uh, so basically, I'll just give you a quick intro of what we are trying to do here. Uh,
Hmm.
in very simple terms, we are trying to talk to people who are actually doing on-ground work, right? No fluff, nothing, very straightforward, direct uh, discussion about what happens on ground, the reality, like nothing theoretical, right? There's a lot of plenty of stuff for that. So yeah, like I mean, I think we've known us each other for like what, 4 3 4 months, or a little more than that, I think.
More than that, actually.
More than
Yeah.
that. Okay, okay, yeah, yeah. So yeah, like I personally found this your story very interesting. That people spend like decades trying to become a professor in US, put everything in their life. You pretty much need to do everything to perfection, and then taking a break and trying to come back and restart things from scratch. That's I found that very inspirational. Exactly why I was like, if nothing, I want to meet and understand how it
Yeah.
operates, right? So yeah, like thanks for doing this, and so yeah, so I think for the larger audience, if you could give a brief intro of
Yeah.
what you do, how do you end up here, what's your story?
Sure. Sure. So thank you, Abhinav, for having me on this podcast. I'm very thankful to you for inviting me. So I'm currently an associate professor at Ohio State University in the US. Currently, I'm on my sabbatical, spending my sabbatical in Bangalore, in India. I've been in the data science space for about 10 years now. 10, 12 years. Prior to that, I was doing my PhD in game theory, which is not quite data science, but
Adjacent area. Yeah,
section with
yeah,
data science.
yeah, yeah.
Uh, so I did my PhD from University of Illinois. So, well, I'll go back even further. So I did my bachelor's from IIT Bombay in 2009. I
Mhm,
was in aerospace engineering department then. Then I went
mhm,
for my PhD at University of Illinois, and I finished my PhD in 2014. But during my PhD, I gotten interested in math. So I used to read and also wrote several papers in applied maths area. And then, of course, after 2015, I heard about reinforcement learning, machine learning, all that new buzzwords that were in the market.
mhm.
So I started delving deep into it, wrote a bunch of papers on it with my students. So that's what has been my journey so far. I've about 60 odd papers in conferences and journals so far, most of them with my students, which are spanning across a large number of different use cases.
Got it. Uh, like, how come you're in India now? Like, what do you
Yeah.
do here?
Yeah. So basically, I don't know if many people know, but faculty get what is known as sabbatical. So we get a 1 year sabbatical leave. So I'm currently on my sabbatical in India, trying to start my company called RewardWise.co. We are basically building an app for businesses to start their own loyalty program. We
Mhm.
look mostly at the offline market, not the online market.
Okay.
So if any offline merchant, a restaurant, a clothing store, a tea stall, if they want to start their own loyalty program or membership program, they can use our app to run their loyalty and membership program. So that's what we are trying to build right now. We are close to revamping our app at this moment. So hopefully in a month or so, we'll launch the updated version of the app, which will have much better user experience and user features.
Got it. Got it. And like very curious, like why a professor who's probably spent 15 years doing heavy maths try to build an app for offline India, that
Yeah.
too loyalty, like there's no fancy I'm computer vision based stuff, something like
Right.
why something like this?
Yeah, so it's very interesting. So, I've been trying to work with industry for quite some time, and the one of the main friction points with industry during all our research was being able to share data. So, industry, I mean, we wanted to work on very sophisticated industrial problems. The
Mm-hmm.
problem was in the absence of data, we had to make a lot of simplifying assumptions about the data,
Mm-hmm.
which I wasn't quite happy about. So there was always this thing in the back of my head that what exactly is happening in industry, like how exactly can I get access to industrial data. So anyways, but besides that, I'm also big into loyalty programs. I'm a member of Marriott, Bonvoy, and Hyatt, and Delta Airlines, and all
Mm,
that stuff.
mm, mm,
So I've been in the loyalty space for 15 years as consumers.
mm, mm,
Loyalty is fairly big in the US, by the way. I mean, you
mm,
get lots of different companies are starting their own loyalty programs and membership programs.
mm,
So I
mm,
thought maybe there is an opportunity in the market to do something similar in India. And I'll also get access to a lot of hands-on data from market, which would help me satisfy my intellectual curiosity as well about
mm.
how exactly to use all that transaction data and membership data and loyalty data to drive more value to the businesses who will be our partners in the future. So that's roughly, the reason why I wanted to get into this space. But of course, one of the main thing, the so I dabbled in a lot of different business ideas where I could potentially use data science to improve
Mhm, mhm,
customer life.
mhm, mhm.
But ultimately, I
Zero
basically
down.
did on RewardWise. Yeah,
Got it. So basically a combination of it being big in the US, probably not so much in India at this point.
correct, correct.
Plus, your experience as a customer, trying to see if you can replicate the same, and then
Yeah,
maybe also thirst for data, intellectual curiosity.
correct, correct, correct.
Interesting, interesting. I personally I have a similar view that retention and customer retention is a big problem in India, like
Correct,
especially from a consumer side. Like
correct.
until unless you don't crack it, pretty much, uh, you have a constant churn of users, then it becomes a very big problem, right?
That's right. That's right.
So, and you also don't know whether the business is viable until unless you have a customer, you figure out a way to retain your customers, right?
Exactly.
So, yeah, like, I mean, for me, like straight away, it makes a lot of sense. But interesting that you're going after offline space, so that's another step there. Uh, Before you decided to, like, let's say, get into RewardWise and probably improving retention or trying to improve that using data science and all, were
Hmm.
there other ideas or business opportunities that you
Yeah.
were interested in?
Certainly. So in 2018 or 19, we had a patent on energy efficiency from Ohio State. So OSU still owns the patent, and we've successfully commercialized it in the automotive space.
Mhm.
One of the leading automotive supplier is using our algorithm for improving energy efficiency in vehicles. So I thought that maybe there is an opportunity to commercialize energy efficiency in outside of vehicles, so buildings, for instance, data centers, buildings, so on and so forth. So I dabbled into energy efficiency earlier. I kind of realized that the market is not there for energy efficiency. So I stopped working on energy efficiency, tried to work within the energy space for some time. Didn't quite get a very good problem statement where I could use my skill set to use and deliver value to
Why did you think so? Like, what was
yeah.
the challenge? What stopped you
Yeah.
from?
So if you think about efficiency as a whole, so there are uh, diff, so I think there are a very important reasons why energy efficiency is a big challenge. So the problem I realized is not that there is lack of vendors providing solutions in the market. There are ample number of vendors providing energy efficiency solutions in the market. The real problem is that there is no single person responsible or single organization responsible for the energy, for minimizing the energy cost for a particular business. So we might think that McDonald's might be paying a lot of money for energy usage, whether it's in stores or whether it's in supply chain. But the fact of the matter is nobody in McDonald's would be, McDonald's might be just a specific company. But
Yeah,
the point I'm trying to make is that every company has a lot of energy usage, but one person or one department will not be responsible for how much the cost
got it,
they're spending on energy
got
is.
it. So in the case it's distributed across multiple departments and
Correct.
probably doing a good job there,
Right.
doesn't incentivize any specific spock the
Correct.
company
Correct.
wants
Correct.
to.
So that's one part. The other part is there are other areas where the whole market structure is very, very um convoluted. So I'll give you an example of a mall. So a mall is owned by a entity and they get the electricity bill. Now, what they do is they divide the electricity bill by the square footage of the mall and multiply it by the square footage of a
Mm.
specific store, and
Mm.
they'll charge them whatever the electricity bill is going to be.
I see. I see.
Now, the mall owner who owns the building doesn't have any incentive to reduce the electricity cost, and the
Okay.
individual stores don't really have the uh,
Leverage or power to
yeah, exactly, the power to. So
negotiate. Yeah.
essentially,
Yeah.
that market is broken, and so I just
Yeah.
realized, okay, I have to
Yeah.
get out of this
But
market.
that's the consumer side, right? What if you were trying to serve large manufacturing plants or
Right,
where
right,
and what is energy spend from the cost point of view? Like how big
right.
is
So yeah, I think for the consumer companies, it's usually 1%, 2% of their
okay.
total operating cost. So it's really very small
Yeah,
percentage of their operating expense.
right.
For a company like pharmaceutical, it might be 50, 60% of their electricity cost, I mean, of their energy cost or operating expense. But the problem with pharmaceutical is it's a regulated industry, so they don't want to make any changes to the preset government approved air
Process.
conditioning
Right,
system and
right,
processes and so on and so forth,
right,
just to save maybe like $1 million or $500,000 or whatever, like
right,
whatever the
right,
number may be.
right.
So that's pharmaceutical. Then if you go to other areas such as iron and steel plants
Yeah,
and
yeah,
chemical fertilizer plants, they
yeah.
are also heavy users of energy, but they typically use it in the form of petrol, diesel, gasoline, chemicals, and all that stuff. And I don't really know exactly how those processes work. I don't know if there is a possibility of reducing energy
Mm.
consumption there.
Right, right.
So yeah, and those are also safety critical. So they don't want to again save money. Just they don't know if
That is
the
the
process
risk of
will
the risk
break or
of
not. So
safety. Mm-hmm.
yeah, exactly.
And when you mean energy safety, you mean probably a bunch of devices to like
Correct, correct. So
stuff
you need
with
sensors, then you need actuators, you need
right, right,
control cables and all that stuff. So
right. So
there'll be
that
a lot of instrumentation needed in order to save energy.
got it, got it.
Yeah. So
Understood, understood. Makes sense, makes sense. Interesting. It's actually quite uh, intriguing to know the on-ground reasons, right?
right,
Because when you look at from a probably a theoretical point of view, a spreadsheet will
correct,
basically say, you know what,
exactly. Yeah,
10% यहाँ पर चलेगा, this is like slam dunk. And then
right, right.
then you realize
Exactly,
that there's a reason why this arbitrage is there, or there's a reason why it's
exactly,
like this.
exactly. Yeah.
Interesting, interesting.
So as a faculty, we don't know the ground reality. We don't know about these commercial contracts
Right,
that office
right,
buildings have with their tenants
right,
and malls
right,
have the
right,
stores and all that stuff.
right, right.
So I took a leap of faith and I spent 1 year trying to get into the market, and then I realized, okay, I guess this is
Yeah, and incentives is a big reason. Like,
yeah,
I mean, that's the biggest point. Like, I think especially it was a big learning curve for me as well when I moved from academia to industries that uh, somebody needs to be incentivized on their
right,
side. Like this needs to help somebody like get promoted or
correct.
needs to help their career in some way.
Hmm.
We were trying to do a similar thing, cricket. We were like, we're spending $11 million creating an IPL team. So
Uh-huh.
we should be able to help them create a better team with 20% less spend.
Right.
We did all these models. We had this kind of like game theory centric model where we could, on the fly could price a player and do all that. We were
Hmm.
so happy we did all this. 3 months we worked on our own. We went to the first set of meetings and
Right,
this guy is like, हाँ ठीक है, it's fine, this is cool, but on the auction day, owner का बेटा आएगा and you'll decide something else.
right.
And it was like, and then we realized that the game was something different, that they were playing the ego game or there's
Right,
something else at play. They were not trying to create the most efficient
right,
team. And yeah, that's when I realized, yes, it's a good problem scheme, but probably won't
correct.
make money there. So
That's right. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Interesting.
So I've come to realize that there are many such problems in the market where there is a lot of value associated with the activity,
Yeah,
but there's no way to capture that value.
yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
can create value, but you cannot capture it. And in which case, what's the point of
What's the
that?
point? Yeah, yeah. It's difficult to sustain. Yes, yes.
Right.
Understood. Understood. Great. I think that's a very interesting set of experience. But that's good. I think you had one stint at NNG. That probably didn't work out, but I think you'll have a better time, ideally, hopefully, with RewardWise. But I
Right.
want to go back to your PhD time and your perspective on that.
Sure.
Uh, at least post, I think 2015, 16 is when I think kind of data science started kind of percolating in the market. People
Mm-hmm.
started hiring, PhD was like a key requirement,
Mm-hmm.
right? Uh, so that was one place where industry may people were getting absorbed, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But otherwise, from your point of view, besides academia and maybe these few specific roles, right?
Right.
Where else do people who do PhD go? Like where else? What are the other opportunities for them? How
Yeah,
do
I
you?
think so. I know more about the US market, less about the Indian market, but I can maybe make some assumptions about the Indian market is similar to the US market and
Yeah,
try to give a
yeah,
bird's eye view of what I see.
yeah.
So, there has been a surge of number of data science enrollment in the PhD program over the past few years.
Mm-hmm.
As a result of which, right now, there is a large number of people who have done their PhD in data science. Maybe it's machine learning, maybe it's computer science,
Related areas, right?
but
Yeah,
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 in
yeah.
different areas, computer vision and all that. Turns out there aren't many jobs in the market for those kind of skill set. So I think there are the data science as a whole, there are like two distinct aspects of it. One is the algorithm design aspects of it,
Mm-hmm.
which is where PhDs excel at, which is
Mm-hmm.
what
Mm-hmm.
what should the algorithms be.
Mm-hmm.
The other side is creating the data pipelines, creating the dashboards, running the experiments, making sure that the data satisfied all the
Mm-hmm.
compliance and legal requirements and all that
Mm-hmm.
stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it turns out that a lot of value in businesses isn't just managing the data,
Right.
making sure it's secure, making sure the dashboards are working and
Yeah,
data
yeah,
pipelines are correct and all that
yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
As far as getting value out of algorithms is concerned, I see two distinct problems in the market right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I may be wrong, but this is
Mm-hmm.
my understanding of the situation.
Mm-hmm.
There are top companies, let's say top 10 companies in India, top 10 companies in US, top 10 startups in whatever Bangalore, who
Mm-hmm.
understand the value of data science and who try to
Mm-hmm.
hire people
Mm-hmm.
with masters, PhD, or whatever data science skill set to build algorithms
Right,
for their use cases. But there is this long tail of companies, like let's say outside of the top 10, outside of the top
right,
20
right,
companies,
right,
where actually the problem is that the business leaders don't even know where a person with a PhD in data science who designs algorithms for a living, where exactly can they impact their own top line or bottom line.
right,
And that I feel is a very, very unfortunate situation because all these businesses are struggling to get cash, they are struggling for growth, but they don't seem to realize that having someone who can design algorithms for them can really bring significant growth as long as somebody there knows where those algorithms would be needed. So,
right,
are they needed in supply chain? Are they needed in logistics? Are they needed in optimization of cost or whatever, energy efficiency, whatever that particular area may be?
right,
So, unfortunately, that's the situation right now. And
right,
I'm
right,
not quite sure how exactly to address that part, which is again comes back to so this is not an incentive problem, this is just lack of knowledge problem.
right.
And
Information arbitrage. Yeah,
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 yeah, yeah. No, I do see that as a problem, right? I think, uh, especially if you look at it from a trading point of view or the financial services space, right?
hmm,
I think those businesses are entirely based on and effectively on data science and modeling, right?
right,
Your entire efficiency, your entire margins, whatever, right, are based on how good your models are, right?
right,
And
right,
in periods of bad times, like when markets turn bad and all, it's pretty much down to your risk management, which are
right,
also essentially some bits of modeling, right? So I think that industry's figured it out, but the operational companies where you actually have a business, you're running a
Correct.
business, right?
Correct.
I think that's where there's a big gap between what is possible and what's actually being executed. And as you
Right.
mentioned, like uh, I see those opportunities right away, it's there, but aligning stakeholders, convincing them,
Right. Right.
and pushing through, it's altogether a different
Yes.
set of skill sets. And I
Right.
realized that the people who have the ability to solve the problems and people who have ability to convince, the
Correct.
overlap between them is very less.
That's true.
Which is why I think yeah, we are in this state. But
Because, yeah, I think ultimately PhD is not a training in convincing other people
right,
the value of
right,
your
right,
algorithm. It's more
right,
about understanding the scientific process
right,
of
right,
developing those
right,
algorithms.
right,
So you're
right.
absolutely right in saying that the overlap is really very little.
Very little. It's surprising part is like I when I got into this whole data science space, I
Mm.
thought it's matter of 3 4 years and all companies will
Yeah.
adopt all this and
Yes.
there will be a margin expansion of 4 5%. And but after started working, I realized building models is one thing, getting them to production is something else.
Right.
And
Right.
then I realized we were picking wrong problems.
Mm.
Then there's all set of issues across the board.
Right.
So what we assume as solving the problem is like 20 30% of it. उसके
Right.
बाद there's his whole space, and also I think you touched upon that fact that uh, besides algorithm design, there is this whole space of getting your data in the right place and all, right, which is
Right.
data engineering, right?
Right. Right. Right.
And I think I've seen this journey. Like when we started off in 2016, all everyone was focused on Kaggle models
Uh,
and all. And
uh,
within 2 years, they were like, okay, we build the models of production में कैसे जाए? Then realized
right.
not
Right.
like typical software.
Uh,
And then you had these bunch of tools coming together and all. Then they figured out, okay, models deploy वगैरह कर सकते हैं. Then they realized, oh, the data is not coming correctly. It's not
correct.
in
Correct. Correct.
place.
Yeah.
The pipelines are not that easy to manage,
Right. Right.
right? And then this whole set of new formats of data pipelining, orchestration, right? This whole set of software engineering around data started
Correct.
coming through. And now you have a term called modern data stack
Right.
that
Right.
suits all these set of tools, right?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And yeah, and you now have two very large billion-dollar companies, much more bigger than billion actually,
Right.
Snowflake and Databricks, which
Correct.
actually kind of try to integrate this whole space
Right.
into
Right.
one.
Right. Right. Right.
But yeah, I
But
think I
the
think
some of the things, like data integrity and all that, they don't necessarily take care of that. You still have to take care of it.
yeah,
But some of the things that the user input is wrong, and so it
right.
propagates downstream in the data
Yes,
pipeline
yes, yes, yes,
and creates a lot of trouble for the data
yes,
science
yes, yes,
algorithms also.
yes,
So those
yes.
are also things
Yeah,
that
yeah.
needs to
So I think those parts are still left. So we're still figuring out that
be
data availability other part. I
right.
think once that gets solved, people will be like, okay, now where is the my $1 million of worth of value? And then they come to question, okay, you know what? The logic or the approach that we did,
Correct.
there's gaps there.
Correct. Correct.
And yeah, I think you touched upon the right point. Like it's building these pipelines and all is very similar to doing supply chain,
Right.
where you need to keep working backwards from your end goal.
Correct. Correct.
So what do you think are few opportunities from the Indian space where you straight away see slam dunk opportunities to provided, let's say, there is a stakeholder in those companies who's willing to, give data science as a real shot, right?
Right.
So
Right.
what are those areas or problem statements where you think, the right team with the right set of tools and all, right, can actually deliver that value?
Right. I think there are many such opportunities I see in India. There are two specific reasons why those opportunities are particularly relevant for Indian markets. One is the size of the data sets are huge because there are just too many transactions happening.
Okay.
And the second thing is the consumers are very value conscious consumers within India,
Mm-hmm.
within the country.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like the bulk of the consumers are very value conscious. As a result of it, there is both the pressure to reduce the cost, make sure that the business is very profitable, optimized, and all that stuff. So that and also you have a lot of data. So both of these together means that you can really leverage data science for improving business outcomes. So if you think about from a quick commerce perspective, there are lots of opportunities where
Right.
there
Right.
may be wastage happening, there is deliveries happening, like lots of places where data science can be used to do the optimization,
Yeah.
end-to-end
Yeah.
optimization of the whole process. If you think about companies, e-commerce companies, they mainly focus on recommendation systems and whatnot.
Right.
I was also a consultant at Dream 11 a
Right.
few years back.
Right.
And at that time, we had launched one product on payment optimization.
Right.
So how
Right.
exactly to route payments through the gateways.
Right.
As soon as we launched the algorithm, we immediately saw 1% uplift in the
Right.
success rate of the payments.
Right.
So some of those things are like payment success rate. Nobody probably thinks about it as much
Yeah.
as
Yeah. Yeah.
they should be. But turns out that there is a huge opportunity for data science to improve the success rates of the payment, which directly impacts the top line and bottom line of the companies.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, same recommendation systems comes to the mind, payment gateways. Then I think entertainment is also another huge area. I was reading an article about some of these new age entertainment companies and how they have used data science. I mean, not necessarily like they've used mainly statistics, not necessarily
Right.
like
Right.
full-blown
Right.
data science,
Right.
to figure out, what emotions they should have in the videos in order to make it viral, make it more appealing to the masses, and so on and so forth. So, and YouTube gives you a good job. YouTube does a good job of
Yeah.
providing you with the
Yeah.
data
Yeah.
about when the people are dropping off, when the people are
Right.
watching
Right.
more. So they use all that data to improve the overall sort of the topics on which they want to create content,
Right.
the
Right.
actors they want to have, the emotions they want to portray. Like all of that is something that people have been doing in India. And I
Right.
think that's why I think it's a very, very exciting opportunity. It's just that the stakeholders are not
Yeah.
convinced and on board. But
Yeah.
otherwise, once they are
Yeah.
on board, I think it can
Right.
take off fairly
Right.
quickly.
Right. I think it's a matter of time before
Right.
some of the players do it, then the
Correct.
others try to, it puts the pressure on the others to pick it up. But I think the 2 points that, the massive scale of data and the need, the very thin margins
Correct.
basically means that there's a big need
Right.
for data science to deliver, right? I think also the reasons why I think while DS has been around this space fair bit, right? I think the reason why it's not yet completely percolated or reached its complete potential is also because I think we were in a phase where money was easily available, right?
Right.
I think now that we see interest rates going up, we see the end of so-called the ZERP era, right?
Right. Right.
I think this need for increased profitability and efficiency will lead them to, asking questions as to what
Sure.
can we
Yeah.
do, right?
Definitely. Definitely. That's the hope. Yeah.
Yeah. While, we're still catching up with data science and the maths and all, which probably was available since 1990s. You have this new wild card in the space called generative AI, which
Right.
just before I thought, by the time something like this would happen, I would have already been done with my career. But somewhere like probably just the early stages of it, right? It's out there. And every day you go out, check it, some Twitter or something, right? You see this new insights. Just recently
Right.
I was seeing Claude as is showing signs of consciousness, right? It's by Anthropic. Yeah. So what is your take on this whole generative piece? Because the expectation from uh, especially from something like this was that it would make all mundane and knowledge kind of work, uh,
Hmm.
faster and easier. Thereby, people with creativity or people in creative spaces are
Right.
the ones who will thrive. But it seems to be like, at least in the early times, it seems to be operating a little differently. The
Right.
first set of people it's gone after are the ones, video makers, the movies, the ability to generate these on the fly.
Right.
So, what is your take? How you're seeing it? What were your initial
Yeah.
thoughts?
Yeah, I think so far I've not really seen any compelling use case of generative AI. Of course, there are certain areas like question answering and all that, which is much has much better customer experience than before, purely on the back of generative AI algorithms. But other than that, I don't really. I've been to many Gen AI events trying to understand what exactly are people trying to do with
Mm-hmm.
generative AI, and I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
really impressed with what many people are trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I so at the core of it, generative AI is an algorithm that generates a sample from an unknown distribution. So
Mm-hmm.
because you don't know the distribution, you have a lot of data. You try to infer what that distribution is, and then
You
appropriately
sample from there. Yeah. Yeah.
to
Yeah.
generate a sample from it. Now, this core idea has been around since 1950s. Actually, this emerged in particle physics. Actually, particle physicists were the first Gen AI scientists
Okay.
as
Okay.
such. Um, so there have been applications in other areas, not necessarily computer vision and text. So now those applications in computer vision and text have emerged. Not quite sure whether these are the right areas for generative AI algorithms, but there could be other areas, like I said, particle physics, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
where it has already been very useful.
Okay.
And I
Okay.
think we will come up with new areas outside
Right.
of text and vision,
Right.
or text or images or content, where
Right.
this could be useful. Now, what happened in text, image, and content is, as soon as it became very cheap to create new text, new images, and new content, uh, there is a glut in the market of new
Yeah.
content.
Yeah.
As a result of this, the value of content has gone down. At least
Yeah.
the AI
Yeah.
generated
Yeah.
content has come
Yeah.
down.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if you create content after putting in the effort, it
Right.
still remains relevant even in today's market.
Right.
But if you don't put in the effort, you go to ChatGPT, put in a prompt, get an article, and upload it
Right.
on your website, that's not
Right.
going to create the same level of
Right. Right. Value.
excitement
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
value that
Right.
it
Yeah.
you would have otherwise thought.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. But I think you touched upon the right point that this technology has made at least these two artistic slash
mhm.
creative outlets little, it's kind of slashed their economic value, right?
Correct, correct.
It's substantially made it very deflationary effect on them, right?
Hmm.
Uh,
Exactly.
and yeah, but I think my personal take is that it's it seems to be doing decently well in very specific, narrow problem statements.
Hmm.
I think the overarching outcomes, as you mentioned, might happen underground or the background. Right? We might not
Correct.
even be aware of it. I remember one of my friends, I think they were trying to use Gen AI in certain ways to simulate material science.
Yes, yes,
Uh, they were trying to simulate better quality material science, right?
correct,
So
correct.
I think these are some areas where, they might happen in the background and we might not be aware.
Right,
But I think at on the consumer facing side of it, it seems it definitely hasn't had a very big impact per se right away, right? But
right,
it's
right.
definitely at some level played a deflationary role on content creation, and that's where I think that's when you realize what okay, now you have created 10 companies who are all building tools to, let's say, churn out content.
Yeah,
Suddenly everyone is doing it. So what do you do now? Like,
correct.
it's you have this.
Yeah,
I think it's put this whole game theory space out there. Like companies are
correct,
probably just
correct.
trying to solve their first step. But
Right.
what if that happens? I think it's not clear. What's the way forward? But
Yeah.
understood.
I
But
think, yeah.
mhm.
So building on that particular point, some areas where I do see generative AI being very useful, like outside of, like you mentioned about the materials
Right,
thing, right?
right, right,
Creating new
right.
materials. So there's another problem about generative AI, which is, let's say US bank. So a bank in the US also has an India office,
Mm-hmm.
and they somehow want to share customer data from the US office to India office. Now, the problem is that legal regulations do not allow you to share customer data from the US and send it offshore to Indian data centers.
Right,
So they have to generate samples of
right,
customers
right, right,
using Gen AI algorithms in
right,
the US, and then they can ship those data to India.
right,
So
right,
people know, okay, this is what the data set is going to look like.
right. You can build your models, test them.
Right. Right.
Then
Build
once,
a model, test them, and then ship it back to the US. So those
right,
are the areas where I think Gen AI will be more useful.
right.
And unfortunately, nobody's, or at least I don't know who is working on it, because people tend to understand Gen AI is equal to LLM, but Gen AI is a technology about generating samples. And so you can
LLM is
generate,
a textual,
LLM is, yeah, just the text instantiation of that particular
right,
technology. So,
right. Yeah,
yeah, I
understood.
think those things will come in the next 10 years or so.
So, coming back to the earlier question of, you know,
Mhm.
how you see DS, data science slash now this whole generative space, right? And that it's not being completely utilized by the industry, in the Indian space and all. So, if let's say you were an industry leader or you were a key stakeholder for the government or a key executive in a firm, right? And now you realize that, what, we have lagged on this
Mhm.
usage of data science or AI, right? Uh, and I want to invest, I want to start leveraging them, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Uh, what would you say would be your action plan for the next 6 months, or how would you operate, or how would you go about it? You have no idea. You heard the rumors, you've seen the posts, you've seen what is happening, but let's say you want to leverage it, you want to start thinking about it. What do you
Right.
think would be your action plan for the next 6 months, couple of quarters?
Yeah, I think, I'm a big believer in training people.
Mm-hmm.
So, assuming that many of the stakeholders within the company are not necessarily familiar with how data science can improve their business unit outcome,
Mm-hmm.
I think the first goal should be to train them in the data science way of thinking. Maybe spend 4 days, 5 days telling them about different use cases,
Mm-hmm.
case studies from different companies where
Mm-hmm.
data science is used
Mm-hmm.
to improve the overall business outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
Once that happens, then each of them will be better able to understand within their business unit where all they can apply data science.
Right.
One good rule of thumb is if there is a predictability in any process, data science can really exploit that predictability and improve the overall outcome a lot. So, for instance, if um, like demand side management, for
Right.
instance,
Right.
like
Right.
what is that called? Like ordering
Mm-hmm.
items in the morning so that
Right.
during the day you can uh,
Service
send
them.
it to customers. Demand
Right.
optimization,
Right.
no,
Right. Demand
inventory.
aggregation. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh-huh. So you need to know whether there is a lot of randomness in the data, in the prior data that you have seen, or there is
Mm-hmm.
limited randomness. If it is
Mm-hmm.
limited randomness, data science can help you a lot. If
Right.
there is a lot of randomness, then again, data science will not be helpful.
Right.
So at least you can score, you can come up with a score that, okay, these are the places where there is a pattern, either due to human habits, either due to legal regulations, either due to I don't know, the way society functions. There are patterns, and there is fewer sources of randomness.
Mm.
Then you apply data science in those particular processes, and you can see huge improvements.
Right.
And those are the areas which we need to prioritize and start implementing one by one. Start implementing data science in one of those areas. Do experimentation. I think figuring out like the 6 months will go into just building that experimental framework
Right. Right.
to know whether algorithm one is better or algorithm two is better.
Right.
So
Right.
a lot of that background work also needs to be done, which doesn't involve algorithm design at all,
Right.
but it
Right.
just
Right.
requires making sure all the data pipelines are working and the
Yeah.
dashboards are working and all
Yeah.
that stuff.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
a lot
And
of things have to happen on multiple fronts.
correct. Correct. So a lot of things need to come together for something like this to work.
Right.
But here's the question, right? So let's say, maybe post this podcast, someone gets inspired, an executive. Yes, I want to now bring it over. But here's the challenge that I also see happening, which is, if you ask a data science company, can I solve this problem or not? They're not going to be honest about it. Like if you have a
Right.
consulting firm, because their incentives are to advise you that yes, this
Right.
problem can be solved, right? It's okay if it's going to take 1 year for them to figure out whether it can be done or not, but
Right.
we can bill you for that time, right?
Correct. Correct.
So how do you navigate something like this? Like, how do you actually differentiate, what this is like, it is actual. Because I think what you mentioned is correct, right? I mean, even before you start bringing over, build a team and all, right? You need to figure out if the problems you're solving actually have possibility to solve them or not, right?
Correct. Correct.
When inherently difficult and there's very little possibility there, then maybe it doesn't make sense, right?
Right. Right.
So what do you do in that case? Yeah,
It's more about design of organizations, right? So how
right,
do you design an organization so that you can even vet the consultants or the kind of people who are coming through the door and telling you that the problem can be solved or
right,
cannot be
right,
solved?
right,
Um, it's a very hard question.
right, right.
If there are simple, what is that called? If you can do simple queries on the data and try to come up with, okay, what sort of behavioral pattern we see, if that gives you some information, I think you can still try to uh, do something about it. But yeah, unfortunately,
There's no straight,
I know in my own life when I work with companies as consultants, there is a lot of iterative process that goes
right,
on
right.
before even coming up with the metrics that okay, this is the right metric to look at.
Yeah,
So it's never a process wherein you tell me the metric and I come in and optimize that metric for you. It's more like it's an iterative process where you tell me the metric for the first time. I look at the data and then I say, look, this metric is not going to move. We need to do something else. And then we have a discussion and engage with a lot of different stakeholders, get the
right,
business people in, get the product managers in, get the customer support in, and try to figure out, okay, what is the metric that alternate metric that we can look at, which
right,
also moves the business needle in the right direction,
right,
but at
right,
the same time is more amenable to data science based investigation.
right,
So it's a bit of an iterative process, and if you
right,
don't have people in house to take over that iterative process, it becomes very difficult
right,
uh,
right.
to do it. And that's why I think there is no right answer to this question. It's just
Understood, understood. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Maybe I think having couple of two, three stakeholder or two, three folks, right, getting probably ideas or problem statements or solutions from two, three different vendors or teams, right? So that we can probably cross check and then from there
yeah, I
take it
guess
forward. So I had one specific case study that I recently heard and wanted your point of view, right? Both from a game theory, incentives, and also trying to touch base upon the point that you had made that, given the fact that you have a lot of data in India, right, and that,
right,
margins are very thin, data science makes a lot of sense. But recently, read somewhere that, Rapido is thinking of moving to a fixed price based model, right?
right,
Where
right,
instead of trying to charge, instead of them trying to figure out the marketplace, have dynamic prices, which is ideally, I would say, the use case of data science, supply matching
right,
algorithms and all. They want to move to a fixed, price based approach, right? Uh, so what do you think about something like that? And also, on the other hand, you have Blue Smart, which is in the market, right? Which also has a fixed slot based approach instead of,
correct,
you trying to anticipate or making supply available. You need
right,
to, book your slots and then they make the cars available. So you have a lot of these companies moving backwards, if I might
correct,
want to say, right?
correct,
Uh, so why do you think that might be happening? What is your POV on this?
right, right.
And yeah,
Yeah, I think my sense is that let's not sense. Let's talk about the theory part of it.
right,
So, data science doesn't exist in a vacuum. Data science is subsumed by markets.
right,
So if there is a specific sentiment within the market, then the data science has to respect that sentiment because ultimately the data science is serving the market.
right,
So when Uber came in and when Uber started having this surge prices and
right,
make
right,
sure supply and demand balance and all that
right,
stuff,
right, right,
they're actually operating at a economically efficient point. They are
right,
they are at a they're at a frontier, efficient frontier,
right,
and uh, and if the markets are okay with you being at the efficient frontier,
Right.
then great, you are at a very sweet spot. And
Right.
I think US market at least became somewhat like that, which is
Right.
people tend to people were unhappy with surge pricing, but
Right.
eventually they turned around and they said, okay, fine, I'm okay with the surge pricing.
Right. Right.
It turns out that maybe in Indian markets, Indian consumers do not like surge pricing. They
Right.
think of it as price gouging.
Right.
Even though the surge pricing actually helps both ways.
Mm.
It also helps customers getting cheaper prices
Yeah.
because they are able
Mm.
to balance the supply and demand.
Right.
And it elicits flexibility within the customer's point of view also. So if I'm leaving from my friend's place, I
Mm-hmm.
have the option of leaving after an hour. We'll just chat for 1 more hour and then we'll
Right.
go back. I'll go back
Right.
home.
Right.
So if there is surge pricing right now, I can move my demand 1 hour later,
Right.
uh, potentially take a cheaper ride.
Yeah.
But if you have a fixed ride, fixed pricing scheme, then
Yeah.
actually you lose that flexibility. Like there is no way to elicit flexibility
Correct.
information
Correct.
from the user
Right. Right.
and then allocate the resources according to the flexibility. So even though dynamic pricing is actually very, very good economically because it takes care of a lot of information exchange that the market is supposed to have, if the markets do not respect it and the markets are going the other way, which is what might be the case here, both
Right.
for Blue Smart as well as Rapido, maybe
Right.
their target segment is the market uh, which doesn't like all this optimization and they just
Right.
want fixed pricing
Right.
because somehow in their frame of mind, it's the more fair way of pricing.
Right. Right.
Then I guess so be it. Maybe they'll come back 2 years later and realize that the markets made a mistake
Yeah.
and they should have been at the efficient frontier.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
with,
Correct.
with
So I think in that case, it's more of a strategic and a business call that
correct, correct. Yeah,
how it's being perceived and yeah.
exactly. I think it is purely on the basis of market perception. I don't think there is any economic reason why
Right.
there shouldn't be surge pricing.
Right. Right. So before we end this, I have a question. Was there any question or any set of questions that I should have asked that I missed asking, which probably, would have helped?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe one question that I wanted to touch upon was this collaboration between industry and academia.
Right. Right.
I've seen a lot of these models in the past in the US.
Right. Right.
Many of those models are not necessarily friendly to either side of the spectrum.
Right. Right.
Uh, I'm not sure if you have any thoughts on, I mean, coming from industry, you have any thoughts on how you would run an
So
industry academia collaboration?
I think the biggest challenge is that I think the point that you made, right, which is building the empathy on the either sides, right? So academia comes with a very and we see this internally within within our day job as well. So despite being the industry, oftentimes we end up building models and then we go to the teams who we want them to implement or execute, right? And the question is like you're not addressing a core problem, like you're not addressing the core issues, right? You see your
Right.
models or approaches are so abstracted away or they don't take the dynamics right. So there is this gap there, right? And typically what happens is that because they are not aware of it, right? Or the teams who are implementing these approaches or being recommended these approaches, they're not aware of the efficacy. So and there is a bit of mistrust as well, right? I think it's the human nature that if you don't understand something, you take it as something which is not accurate or correct instead of
Right.
always being curious, right? So there's this gap that forms over, and on the data science side, I think what typically happens is that the thought process or the approach or whatever skill sets needs needed to be a good one, it's not necessarily the ones which are needed to push these things through, right,
Mm,
or get
mm,
things done. So
mm.
this gap stays, and then
Correct.
the bridge never comes through, right?
Right. Right. Right.
So then what happens is if you take from an academic point of view, this bridge even gets bigger
Mm-hmm.
because you're not even in the same office, right? You're like
Mm-hmm.
where in the academic setup, the approach is different.
Right.
The kind of things get appreciated in academic setup are also different, right? I remember when we were in college, uh, your entire status is dependent on how complex of a project you're doing, or uh, what's the most mathematical stuff you're trying. So I don't know, like at least within my peer group, it was all down to that. Like, this is this algorithm, whatever coding problem I'm working on, or this robotics project I'm building, right?
Right,
And in the industry, at least when you talk from an impact point of view, it's down to commerce, right? You need to make
right, right,
commercial impact. So I think it's mostly the delta is because of this. This is the opportunity, right? But uh, what gets what gets pursued as important in both areas is different, and
right, right,
somewhere the set of folks who have an overlapping interest in both, right? A few
right,
are, and then the bridge never comes through, right? And
right.
even if, let's say, you build it, then you need to keep the momentum going, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I said that's the challenge that I typically see with uh, at least in the Indian context.
Got it. So do you see so I guess some of this divide will remain for a long time, even in the Indian context. So many of these new age companies, I don't know whether they'll be investing with academic scholars on building new sets of technology or not. So I think what you're trying to say is maybe this divide is going to remain for some time and probably will not see as much
So
collaboration.
I think it's not going to be an easy process.
Right, right,
But yeah, like I mean, again, this is one of the areas because it's not done by everyone, right?
right.
Could become a chance for these firms to start bridging, right? And
Yeah,
take a long-term view. So I know there were few firms which had done. I think by the time I think we passed out 2016, couple of years later, I remember a couple of firms having centers of excellence in college.
yeah.
They were sponsoring a few projects and stuff. So I don't know how much of that translated to outcomes, right, on the
Right,
commercial
right.
side and stuff.
Got it.
Uh, but again, like I think this needs to happen. Like this definitely is an opportunity,
Mm-hmm.
and I think this is one avenue where we're bringing it up. So hopefully people can take a more long-term view, right?
Right, right,
But I definitely see that as an edge if you start investing it, right?
right.
Uh,
Wonderful.
and not just from a obviously uh, staying in touch with what's happening in academia, but also from building a pipeline of talent,
Mm.
and it just makes it easier, right? You can very quickly grab the same set of folks. So, but yeah,
Yeah,
that's
awesome.
what's your take? Like, what do you think should be done or could have been
Yeah,
done?
I think the long-term view is the critical challenge because most of the companies I see are focusing on quarters, but not years. And I think unless a company has a 10-year long horizon, doing academic collaboration is probably not going to be fruitful.
Right,
I mean, the way I see academic collaboration happening, you give a project to a professor, the student starts getting trained to solve the problem, then the student solves the problem, then some publication comes out of it. Then, based on that publication or based on whatever the student has done, the company has to start internalizing all that information, all that learning, and write codes and software systems around it in order to productionize it. I think that entire life cycle is 7 to 8 years long.
right, right, right,
From the time the idea was conceived to the time the idea is actually implemented on the ground and is rolled out as a product for their customers. So if companies don't have 8 year long viewpoint, I think it's very hard to pull off a industry academia collaboration.
I see. I
So
think I think that's probably where I think yeah, I think you put a number to that gap.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
I don't even know. I don't know how many companies know whether they'll survive 8 years or not. So yeah,
Correct, correct.
yeah, yeah.
So
So,
in India, I think TCS focuses heavily on research
right, right,
because TCS has a lot of center for excellence. They do a lot of research internally as well, so they know what problems are good to give to academia and what problems are good to keep internally.
right, right.
Uh, but I don't see many other companies doing it, though I may be completely wrong because I don't belong to
Yeah,
Indian academia as such.
understood.
But thank you
Mm.
so much for having me in this
Same here.
podcast.
No
I
worries. Same here. Same here. I think it was great discussing with you.